going to end up they're going to end up having one of the areas watered by a company in Spring Valley, and the other 5, it has to do with the structure of this 5-year contract. The other 5 by a company that's in Orange County. So whereas one is local, 5 of them are most of the business will not benefit businesses in San Diego County, certainly not Southeast San Diego. So there were several decision points along the way, and the city basically said, this is how we've done it. We've always done it. And whereas the issues I've raised since a year ago when I saw the draft or saw the application is that with climate equity, you would be able to, you would choose to use your procurement flexibility to do this. So this might be something that could be happening to other programs, not just transportation and tree watering. And so it might be something for this group to look at, because it really was at this point, unless some things get adjusted in the next, because it's a 5-year grant, you might be able to redo some of it, but it is something that at this point is a missed opportunity relative to procurement, climate equity, and the actual trees themselves. So Julia, I'd be glad to send you more information, or the chair. But anyway, this would be something that might be not just for trees, but for other things in the as we implement climate equity and the climate action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. And are the other members, no other hands raised?
I see no other hands raised. So
Okay,
no other public comment at this time.
so no other public comment? All right, we will move on to agenda item number 7. This item is really just looking if there's any unfinished business from previous meetings that anyone needs to address or discuss. I don't expect any today, but there might be at future meetings. Is there any other unfinished business anyone has? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our action items. We have 3 action items this afternoon. The first is the discussion and potential adoption of the bylaws. Just to overview, the bylaws in their draft form are included in the materials attached to the agenda. We went through them section by section at the last meeting, incorporated all of the changes. Additionally, there were comments from the city attorney's office that were really minor in nature, but clarifications on a number of items, and all of those have been incorporated. So we'd be happy to lead a discussion on any additional edits, or if not, we can take a motion to approve the minutes. Bylaws, sorry.
I got a chance to go through it, and it looks to me like it matched up well with our minutes. Things we changed. I didn't notice some other changes, but I assume it was really made by legal, so I would need the adoption of these bylaws for the board.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving minutes?
Bylaws.
Bylaws? Okay, and just for the minutes, next time we have a motion by Stan, a second by Ian. Okay. Then we have 2 additional action items. We will take them in order. The first is consideration of an task force to develop a 2025 action plan. So as outlined in the minutes and really our charter, we need to create an action plan as a committee for what will be our next year's work and components and items. Talking to the chair, which we thought that it would be good to have an ad hoc committee, task force or subcommittee to develop that. She also expressed interest in being on that committee. So wanted to see what other people thought about that, as well as what other interest there might be related to participation in that committee. So open up for discussion and questions.
Yeah, I had a question. Can you explain how this task force relates to the requirement in bylaws for an annual work plan? Is it different in the other?
Same, I would just clarify. Written as action plan for the agenda, but the 2025 action plan will be your plan for 2025.
So it would be the same thing.
Same thing.
That's what I just thought that terminology was. Thanks.
Maybe rely on the minutes. This one be the same. Helpful.
Yeah, and it would take an action or a designation by the chair to create it, so I think we could just title it appropriately. In any motions.
The bylaws state that the action plan or the work plan needs to be. Can you remind me of exactly the time? It needs to be done in December so that we can share with the environment committee in January? Is that right?
January, and I believe Julia clarified that that was a city requirement.
It's not necessarily a requirement, but it's helpful to help. And guide your work, and in your bylaws, you say, shall develop an annual work plan, approve it by the January board meeting or as scheduled by the chair, so you have a little bit of flexibility there. And review progress and make updates quarterly at board meetings.
And then another reminder is in our bylaws, we would be dark the month of December, so that would give some time for the committee, or the task force to develop this action plan and return and present something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a sense of how.
Sorry.
How large this task force would be.
I don't think there's, yeah, it has to be less than one.
Less than a quorum.
Andrew, did you have another question?
Yeah, Julie, in what you said, what is the relationship with the environment committee? It's the board you reference is us, right?
Yes.
And so do we stipulate anywhere where or how we share it with the environment committee?
You have separately under your functions, your guidance, the environment committee. So I would assume if you had you create an annual work plan, that is something you could then present to the environment committee.
Yeah, thank
I'd like to participate in such a.
Is there any other interest? I normally would nominate someone who's not here, except for I did talk to Cynthia and she was interested in participating. So we've got two members. I think it'd be good to have at least one or two other members for that.
Be happy to help.
Okay,
So I'm still a little bit confused about the number, because if it's less than a quorum, what's your answer, Julie? It says in your task forces are less than a majority of the quorum, which would be a smaller number.
Maybe less than 6 or 5 or less people should be in the ad hoc subcommittee.
I'm happy to help out if there's.
okay. Well, that would put us at 4, which would be still less. I think that's probably good enough unless anyone else wants to participate. So with that, I think we'd entertain a motion to form the ad hoc task force to develop the 2025 work plan with Cynthia, Stan, Andrew, and Ian as the members.
So moved.
Okay, a motion by Stan. Andrew, a second. All in favor? Okay, that was everyone, so there are no abstentions and no no's.
Question about the task force ad hoc recall. Would staff really be available to come on that too?
Yeah, I'm happy to, if there's a standing subcommittee, which is not ad hoc, staff is always active standing subcommittees. But given that we're kind of figuring out the purpose, the goals of the advisory board to make sure I'm happy to participate.
I think it'd be helpful to have an understanding of what is in the pipeline for docketing to environment committee or full council, then we can kind of help that guide the development. And I'm sure there'd be other things that go into it, but knowing kind of what's to come, what's being routed or in the process of being routed. Anticipated.
So then, moving on is a discussion and potential consideration of a standing subcommittee on outreach. As a reminder in the minutes, sorry, in the bylaws we just adopted, there is the opportunity for standing subcommittees, but none are specifically called out. There are different requirements related to them, as staff would need to participate, as well as those would be subject to the Brown Act and record keeping. One of the things that we had discussed, or Cynthia and I had discussed, is if there, because outreach is going to be a component of this, should that be one of the standing subcommittees? And so I think it's open for discussion of either interest in participation in that, as well as when we should potentially create one, and who would be interested in participating. I will say that we don't need to create one today. We also could just talk about it and then defer that into next year when we have a better idea of what the work would entail moving forward.
I believe we should form one. I think that engagement and outreach with the community and, you know, other nonprofit organizations and other people that are, you know, have interest in these efforts will be absolutely crucial. So I think having consistency and a very you know, a real plan around that we can build off of and modify throughout time will be really, really important.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with what you said, Jamie, about the importance of it, and the need to really proactively reach out to the constituencies that we want to be able to include in our discussion. I guess for me, it's premature to create a standing committee until we have a better idea what the work plan is going to be. So I myself will hold off until the work plan is at least in draft.
And I'm just re-looking at our bylaws, and it says a motion to create a subcommittee will include direction on the content and preparation of a subcommittee charter entailing purpose, objectives, membership, and meeting schedule. So I think a lot of that would be dependent on the work plan. I think I tend to agree that this would maybe be better at our January meeting to discuss. But I agree as well. I think it's important.
Second.
I don't think that was officially.
Just recheck what James said. This is so important to this group, is such an important role. This, I like to see it maybe as a standing discussion. There would be opportunities for outreach and for that, just so we talk about it. I agree with putting kind of work on the format or being involved. It just seems like something we should just always think about at every meeting. You know, what's the opportunities coming up, or who has seen something we can get involved in.
Be a different pathway too, instead of having separate standing subcommittees, it's just what the group talks about at each meeting. So
Yeah, initially, I think that's pretty important. All of us have different connections and interests. So that
I think it would still be useful to have like a subcommittee to maybe like manage and execute those types of things, but like the broader conversation of outreach can always be addressed within this group.
Yeah, I tend to agree, because I think a lot of the logistics of some of that outreach are going to be on the committee. So I think the subcommittee can help. So, okay. I think these are all great points. I think as there's more of a work plan, a lot more clarity, potential for opportunity to create on that. in the meantime, I think if everyone can think about interest and involvement of that as well as specifics for the ultimately what the charter and direction would want to entail. Helpful.
For the work plan, we can put that down as something we should work on.
We can.
Write that down.
It's the first item.
Speaking of, going back to the ad hoc committee, just remind me, so there's four of us. I assume the chair, since she's on it, would be the one that would say, let's get together. She's gonna convene us or get us on a call. It's not clear to me what the next step is.
Yeah, we can work back with Cynthia. I assume that I mean, what we did is we kind of just emailed availability.
Yeah.
So she can get that going and include Julia, would be my guess to get that started.
So, yeah, that'd be good.
I think it'd be really helpful if, in some way, and have some thoughts, I'm sure you do too, about how the subcommittee gets its ideas.
Mhm.
You know, so what kinds of things will be in the work plan, that could be a fruitful, you know. Either we don't have time to bring it back at this meeting because we. Anyway, if there was some kind of invitation or.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how they would do that, but to allow people to. You know, suggest the things that they're aware of that could fit really nicely into what they want to do.
Well, I think the only way to really do that without a Brown Act violation would be if anybody has ideas. They want to send them maybe to the chair directly. And as the chair on the committee, she would be able to kind of help look at that. And then I would expect we wouldn't approve it in January. I think we'll have room for discussion and comment and be returning in February. But yeah, if one member was sending it to all four members, then that's almost a quorum, so that'd be a problem. Okay. Any other comments on either the work plan or the subcommittee on outreach? I think since we're not forming one, I don't think we need a formal motion.
I just have a comment for the work plan. I know previously I presented a very high level, very quick, like, here's a bunch of plans that are related to the city's Resiliency. I think that's maybe a piece I would recommend to start of like, what is this doing in this space? And then you guys can on either A, what you want to learn more about, could be where are places that you want to advise the city on, or where you think it's really important, there being more action. Also in the resolution, creating your board, think about the programs that are underneath that, biodiversity, climate resiliency, strategy 5 of that, climate action plan, or climate action plan. There's a really detailed dashboard that shows you exactly what we're doing for every action under each of their goals. So you can see what are we doing, what's moving forward, what's going to be, you think should be accelerating faster than it is. And it's same for climate resiliency for each of our goals, for each strategy, we say, is this in progress, is it not yet started? We don't have as much detail, I'll say there, as the sort of action plan. It does give you a little bit of a sense of where are we at, I think.
I'm sorry, am I supposed to, do I have to get recognized in order to comment?
First off,
Well, I think we can just be, if for some reason we have lots of trying to speak at the same time, I'll try to keep track.
I was gonna ask a question similar to that, so I think that's great. We have access to your slides from that.
yeah, it's fun line.
Yeah. If we want to give useful feedback, we have to get in much earlier than the point at which it would be shared with city council or shared with the environment committee, so that feedback can go into, hey, you're missing this point, or this is more important than this is kind of. So not only like what's the plan for when it would be publicly shared, but we're thinking months in advance of when those plans are intended to be done.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the input from this committee, what you envision the committee being helpful with?
So I'll say two things, yes and no, like, we're in plan development, that is always a great point in time for that plan to come to you as an informational item, you guys ask questions to learn about it. But you wouldn't be necessarily providing an official recommendation while we're still in that plan development, but I think it's really important for you to be getting an informational item on it, and you can always be providing feedback as well, appropriate that plan development. Any plan or item that is going to go forward to the council that falls under your purview is probably also going to come to the board for action. So you will have additional opportunity to weigh in on what should be in that plan. When plans are drafted and we're moving to public hearing, there's still draft, there's still opportunity for us to make changes. So there's kind of those two weigh-in things of while they're drafted being developed and then while they're drafted being public hearing. It's
A good point, and I think this will come up in our next item as well. We actually have a plan. My question, always, what can we do to help? Sort of, maybe talk about that.
And then if anyone's thinking of any last thoughts, I think before we close the action items, we need to ask for public comment on the agenda items.
yes, we should.
Okay. If you wish to address the board for an item on today's agenda, please complete and submit a speaker form before the board hears the agenda item. It will be called at the time the item is heard. So are there any public comments on any of the action items? Okay, seeing none. Any other final thoughts or comments on agenda item 8, A, B, or C? All right, we will go ahead and move on to our informational item, presentation on coastal resilience master plan.
So for those who
Probably
are
not much for me to take minutes on during this presentation. I'll just gonna give the presentation. I just listen.
for those online, hopefully you can hear me okay, because the speakers are right by the computer. Actually, Jason, if you guys know, and so the project manager for the coastal resilience master plan, so you're inviting the increase here today. To start from part of the reason why we're doing summer is because we know we're going to experience the rise in San Diego. It's part of the 2050, little under, little over. As we look further out towards the end of the century, the range of projections gets larger, because there's more uncertainty. What gas emissions are going to look like. What this means for us is that, as a city, we need to prepare for sea level rise, and we also need to have some flexibility as we are thinking about those long-term solutions. First step in the process for us was to understand what is exposed, what is vulnerable. So the city undertook a series of vulnerability assessments where we first looked at exposure. Where do we anticipate that we are going to have assets or resources exposed at various potential projections of sea level rise, for both a normal tide event, but also for a storm event. Based off of that, we look at how sensitive is that asset. So an open space area might be really sensitive. Concrete picnic table is not going to be sensitive. We also looked at adaptive capacity. That's the degree or the extent to which that asset or resource can adjust in response to that exposure. The more sensitive something is, the vulnerable, the more adaptive capacity some resource or asset has, the less vulnerable. So the three factors kind of weigh together. And essentially what this did was help us narrow in on what does the city really need to be focused on. We have 17 miles of coastline. We have a lot of coast. We have a lot of assets and resources along that coast. Where should we be prioritizing our efforts and our implementation? And how does that inform strategy development under climate resilient SD? So you guys are familiar with it from the prior presentation, but this is the city's first kind of adaptation resilience plan. It looks not only at sea level rise and coastal erosion, but also extreme heat, wildfire, precipitation driven flooding. These up here on the screen are our 5 overarching goals. They house 88 different strategies that look at how do we build resilience of our communities to be prepared for and respond to climate change driven hazards. How do we make sure that our city is able to maintain those critical essential services? So one of those strategies is the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. This slide just gives you a sense of how we got to where we are today. So as mentioned, let's make a cursor over here. Maybe not. The first step was vulnerability assessments. What's vulnerable? What do we need to be worried about? That second step was climate resilient SD, creating those overarching goals. What are the strategies to address that risk? And then coastal resilience master plan is that next kind of implementation step where we're really narrowing in on what are those potential projects that are going to build resilience. Yeah, ask questions along the way.
Okay.
Sure.
For the vulnerability assessments that the city did, do those they look at city assets, right, like infrastructure?
Yes, there's city assets and resources. The state land seal rise vulnerability assessment, it's the one we did in compliance with 8691. That goes slightly beyond to look at other classes of infrastructure assets. So that could be how much, where do we see private property, where do we see different recreation assets, hotels, different types of ecosystems as well. But it's a higher level analysis.
The AB 691 one is the one that I know more familiar with than other places, but would you say that the city has a good understanding of the vulnerability of the non-built shoreline?
I think there's some more analysis that can be done there to better understand, particularly when we're thinking about different habitats how related to just saltwater over time. I think that's we have a high level understanding of what areas may be impacted, but I think there's a lot of nuances there that could be detailed.
Do any of those vulnerability assessments highlight loss of access? So like not even an ecosystem perspective, but a community component?
We do look at improved coastal access points impacted.
I have a question on this as well. First of all, you talked about 17 miles of coast. Was that the entirety of that coastline evaluated? And the sub question is particularly the difference between public land and privately owned land.
Yes, yes, the entirety was evaluated. The state land sea level rise vulnerability assessment just looks at our state granted lands or our public trust lands. It's almost all of our coastline, but it's not all. There's like some weird pockets that are not state public trust lands that are still city coastline. So the sea level rise vulnerability assessment looks at that entirety of the coastline.
And then the last thing, I don't, not in the biz, so I don't understand the reference to AB 691.
It's a state legislative requirement that all public institutions or governments that have public trust lands that are of a certain size needed to complete vulnerability assessment that met certain requirements. I believe it was by July 1st of 2019. So within San Diego, that was the city of San Diego. The port of San Diego also completed a vulnerability assessment to meet the requirements of AB 691. So this slide is just looking at a lot of text, but essentially what are the ways that we can approach adaptation. Protect is where you are very much going to thinking about defending what is in place, keeping existing alignments and uses. Accommodate is, it sounds like you're accommodating some of that water. This could look like elevating. Relocate is you are moving whatever is exposed out of harm's way. And then hybrid, you're kind of looking at a blend of the different types of approaches. And also, I think an important aspect here is you're kind of thinking over multiple times. Within climate resilient SD, we are taking a nature-based solutions approach as our priority approach when we think about sea level rise. So that is this left-hand side of the spectrum, really going from prioritizing habitat restoration, that's that pure, more natural approach, to a more hybrid, somewhat engineered approach that is designed after mimicking those natural ecosystem services and processes to a more green infrastructure. You're prioritizing these because we know nature-based solutions provide multiple benefits. So they're not only providing that risk reduction to sea level rise, but they might also provide habitat, cleaner air, cleaner water, recreation opportunities. And so that is something that the city has prioritized in climate resilient SD. It was also the preferred approach by far by our community members when we did climate resilient SD. It lines with state guidance and it has lined with state and federal funding opportunities to date, which has allowed us to move some of this work forward.
What does it mean exactly, nature-based solution?
It's essentially it's a project imagination approach that is mimicking or designed after a natural ecosystem. So that could be you are purely restoring a wetland, that could be you were trying to create wetlands, that could be a green infrastructure project where you're creating a rain garden or a bioswale. But it's essentially staying further away from the infrastructure, about infrastructure. The coastal resilience master plan is essentially a prioritization of sites along the city's coastline for pilot project development of nature-based solutions. So we started with 11 sites, we narrowed it down to 6. So La Jolla Shores, Tourmaline, Mission Beach, 2 different sites in Ocean Beach, and then Sunset Cliffs, where we are looking at what is possible from the nature-based solutions approach. If we want to address sea level rise and we want to maximize some of these other benefits to our community, what could we do? What does a nature-based solution look like here? We are funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the California State Coastal Conservancy for our current work.
How are those sites chosen?
That's gonna be my question.
Yeah, a prioritization matrix. Actually, I'll start this one. Sorry. Rough day.
No one.
I know.
Difficulty.
Let me-
Only been doing this a lot.
We looked first at what sites were going to be vulnerable to sea level rise in the near term. From there, we also looked at where was there the potential to enhance habitat, protect wildlife. Where was there the potential to add coastal access to disadvantaged communities, both designated by state designation or by the city's climate equity index. And we had a few other additional factors, one of which being it needed to be a city-owned site. We needed to be a site that we have the ability to build a project or bring a project on. We also looked at overall feasibility of, is it feasible to put a nature-based solution in here? So we had coastal engineers that did a very good high-level assessment of like, could we do a project here? Would it fit? Would it be effective? Before we did that, it was back to the concept. There were a few sites that like Marine Street Beach we looked at, and if we're looking at the site, we're closely looking at sediment movement and talking to some of our staff that manage that site. They said we actually don't see a lot of erosion here. It's pretty stable. We don't think you need to do much here. And so that site then moved off of this because beach is stable, but we're not seeing flooding, and the site is also backed by a quite large swell. There's not the benefit of the project. So that's one.
One of the priorities was to improve access, is that what you said? How, can you say a little bit more, sorry, I'm asking you to speak over, but can you say more about that? My feeling about the sites that you did choose is that they are very well used by humans already. And improving access is great, but you've chosen sites that are already heavily used. And so are we able to improve access to those spots, or are we just trying to maintain access, or, maintain this human focused space?
Yeah.
Which is which is hard to do. But then also on the flip side, could we have chosen some spots that are not very well used or not very critical to most humans, but are also providing important ecosystem services, given the city's diversity of engineering solutions to those kinds of goals that you'd have at a less used human spot?
So I'll add one note of the site prioritization. We also do not include sites where we have any ongoing other city efforts. So Mission Bay, we have Mission Bay 10 million. So that was one we did look at the interior because we have other projects going on. We didn't want to have conflicts or duplication of efforts. With regards to coastal access, one of the things that we are really interested in, and that I think is a work in progress, and one too where we need to partner with some other agencies, is coastal access for some of our more inland communities, particularly to be able to access the coast not by car and by public transit. We're also thinking about coastal access for maybe a more immediate community. How can we get there walking or biking? And so that is one that we've seen a little bit as I get into the designs. We're thinking through, is there a shuttle that runs from a transit station to the coast that could be city run? But I think there's also maybe a lot of other opportunities to coordinate with some of our regional partners in the transportation space to think about how to get access to the coast. Slight tangent, but I think that also addresses some of what we're seeing with extreme heat events, because we know that the coast stays generally than some of our inland communities. Yeah,
Oh, sorry,
don't worry about it.
I'm with you. Were there sites other than this initial pool of 11 that you considered and discarded for whatever reason?
Only if they had, I think too small for a project, or if we had another ongoing city project. So, like, we do not consider Danza because we have an ongoing planning process for Danza moving forward, it would make sense.
So this is just another version of, I think, what Andrew was getting at.
Yeah.
Were there any projects in areas where they were non-human centric that were considered, and I'm getting the impression that that wasn't the case.
I would say, John, we have a pretty developed coastline, so that is also something to think through as we're thinking through these nature-based solutions. We very developed coastline that's been impacted by humans, so that if you're going to do a nature-based solution, typically it's going to be a more hybrid approach, or we need to look at areas where we could change the use of the site to be more nature habitat focused. Yeah.
It wasn't a backhanded way of saying, what about Mission Bay? Because Mission Bay is almost totally used anyway, and so I totally agree with that, and I'm having a hard time thinking of spaces that aren't very actively used by humans.
Yeah.
I think Sunset Cliffs is, I mean, the actual shoreline is not very much used by humans because it's so short and active. But what I've seen from the public events that you've provided so far, the work of this project is to focus on the street then and the bike path, and not a lot about the bird nesting habitat or the seal pullout and sea lion pullout spots. So I'm just really curious what, if there are places, maybe like some of the La Jolla Children's Pool and La Jolla Cove areas would be spots that are still very much used by humans, but where the natural resource value is going to be affected by, or could be the focus of a resiliency project. That's kind of missed by the 6 spots that you've focused on. Just trying to think out loud about what other locations are.
I have a thought on Sunset Cliffs, but I'll wait till we're at that project. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So these are our project objectives. The first is to align with our climate resilient state policy to implement nature-based solutions where they're feasible. Next is to address sea level rise, make sure that we're providing protection to protect habitat, enhance wildlife opportunities where we can, enhance recreation opportunities to protect historic and tribal cultural resources along the coast. And then lastly, to increase coastal access with prioritization for our community seconds. The plan has a few components. I'm kind of breathing it down and keeping it simple. Part of the plan are concept level designs of potential nature-based solutions for these 6 locations along the coast. We are also completing a programmatic environmental impact report. This is our SEQA document to go alongside them. We then have community engagement and stakeholder engagement. So we've been working to be out there in communities, both those coastal communities, but also the broader San Diego community, because we know our beaches and our coastline are assets and resources for all San Diegans, to hear from them. What do they value about the coast? How do they use the coast? How are they envisioning a future coastline with that context of sea level rise? We have a stakeholder advisory committee that's made up of local, regional, and state agencies, as well as some coastal resilience and conservation focused organizations to help inform the more technical aspects of and concept designs. And then we're looking to coordinate and partner with tribes as these projects move forward. So going through each of those designs, our first site is Lovely of Shores. This first one, you're looking at a earthen berm on the north and southern portions. Really neat. There. Okay. On the north and the southern portions, this is a picture of the berm here. It is gently sloping. There is elevation that's providing that protection to the park space behind it. But it's envisioned that it would be able to sit on it, to picnic on it. You can use that space still for recreation and enjoyment. And then in the middle, we are looking at reconfiguring what is currently the parking lot here, so that you have a kind of continuous green space along the backside of walkway here, and that you are realigning the parking behind that park space. We're looking to maintain the same number of overall parking spaces to think about circulation of that parking lot so that it moves through a little bit more quickly. This is one that we do know has some tribal significance, so that's an important consideration for us as this project moves forward. The second option is still maintaining the earthen berm in the northern and the southern sections. But in the middle, we have a seat wall. This is notably the most critical infrastructure that we are using. It provides elevation again to provide that protection, seating as well as some ADA access.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to situate myself geographically. Is this like at Kellogg Park or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Scripps Pier is like right up here.
Okay.
Basically, yeah.
At the concept level here, is that the time to be talking about different kinds of, fulfillment steps, like, or any consideration to permeable surfaces or any of that, or is that not happening at this stage?
It's a little early for for things that we are definitely considering as one, what is the design concept itself? Two, how are we thinking about access and recreation opportunities? Are we thinking about habitat opportunities? Materials is another one. Permeable surfaces is something that we have heard from our asset management departments can be quite difficult to maintain, particularly in an area where you have sand that can infiltrate and then block the permeable surface. And it's just you have to clean it essentially constantly. But yes, thinking about things like materials is something.
Is there another city anywhere in the world or another long coastline that you feel is doing these things or has done these things that you're getting inspiration or whatever from, or yeah?
Yeah, definitely. We have a bunch of case studies in the plan. This particular one, I'm not familiar with local California example of our coastal engineers might be. But some of the other ones, there's some good local examples that I can point to for you. Yeah. Okay. Tourmaline Beach is our next one. We've seen a lot of erosion along the kind of toe end here of the beach. It also moved over from having more sand to a little bit more cobble. So we're looking at an enhanced kind of dune along the toe that's going to be secured by some rocky matter underneath. That is going to provide like repository of sand along the side there. We're also looking at some public safety and public access improvements. So if you're familiar with the site, you come down the sidewalk or the roadway, it's quite steep. The sidewalk just kind of pops you out into the parking lot. There's not that pathway that brings you down to the beach, which is not the safest. There's also a large storm drain culvert that runs down the sides. We've worked with our stormwater department to explore whether or not it's possible to underground that culvert. That would allow us, right back here, to have a public access pathway that's separated from the parking lot, as well as some potential additional green space there. We're also looking at formalizing what is now an informal path that many people take through the kind of rocky outcropping here. So it's a little bit more formal, a little bit of a more straight access down to the beach. When we help pop-ups, we saw many surfers who just kind of hop over the rocks to get down to the beach faster than taking the ramp. So we thought maybe we make that a little bit safer. And then we're also looking at some drainage improvements here from the. For Mission Beach, we have two different, and a good example for this one that we've looked at locally is Fletcher Cove. They did an undergrounding of their storm drain facility there. They've also done sand replenishment, which is separate from what we're looking at that site, as well as added some park space and camping space to location. Mission Beach, we're looking at this section that is from Belmont Park down through Mission Bay Park. This is a section that's not currently included in the Mission Bay 10-year improvement plan. So we're looking at a vegetated dune that runs that length, has some native plantings to hold the dune in place, and maintaining the existing oceanfront rock configuration. A second option for this is keeping that dune but adding some perch beach. If you're familiar with Moonlight Beach and Encinitas, they have a perch beach, where they have volleyball courts that are up at a higher elevation. This is in response to some feedback that we've heard of, the dunes are going to take space in the beach, and they will. And so by doing a perch beach, it is a bit of a trade-off of this green park space, but it provides you that additional beach recreation space and also potentially beach recreation space during a very high tide event. Our next site is Ocean Beach Dog Beach. For this site, this is one where we have some pure restoration that is going on adjacent to an existing restoration project. Mark and Rex, if you have any questions about that, I'm sure Mark would be happy to chat about that one. For this, we are looking to have it be something that we are really prioritizing habitat use over human use in that space. We are then looking at a vegetated dune, again, that would run along the back side of the beach behind the dune. We're proposing a multi-use path. That path would connect the San Diego River Trail and then through Ocean Beach Dog Beach and down to the pier. When I get to our Ocean Beach beachfront site, you'll see that the dune system and the multi-use path are continuous through both project sites. We are, for this option, maintaining our current alignment with our bathroom. We are also looking at an opportunity where it allows us to create a little bit more beach space here by relocating the bathroom back. This is also a more protected location for the bathroom, as well as exploring a potential public transit or shuttle space here that could connect to the Old Town stop and have a shuttle that goes to the beach. So this is a visual of what that might look like. You can see the dune system here, access pathways that move throughout the dune, and then that multi-use path that will run down towards Ocean Beach Pier.
And the dune, the purpose of a dune generally is to prevent water from going higher.
It's going to be for this location. We modeled it after the city's successful program. I was gonna make you guys. So the city currently makes sand berms in the winter. They
Right.
are more so located down on the beach. They provide that protection from the waves moving up. So similarly, it does that. Again, because you have a sand dune, it's also providing a positive line of sea to the beach.
In terms of these designs, has it been a practice along the way to evaluate the life, quote unquote, lifespan of particular project design, given the estimates of sea level rise over time? The uncertainties.
Yeah, it's a great question. We haven't gotten to that level yet. As the projects move forward into the engineering, that's where we'll get more of like we'll dive in on the specifics of exactly how wide, exactly how big. What does that look like if we start to model it against sea level rise projections? In the environmental document, we have estimates of what we think is like a reasonable amount for purposes of sequence to give us that environmental coverage and to understand will the project have an impact on the environment. With the specifics of exactly how wide, we still need to look to narrow it on as it moves through engineering.
Yeah, and I guess I was thinking of it along the lines of if I'm a taxpayer thinking about these project costs. How long is it likely to last? Spend this money on this, is it going to last 10 years, 5 years, 25 years? Because there's so many uncertainties in the sea level rise projections that you started out with here.
And sorry, on a shorter term basis, is the sand dune something you have to replenish every year? Like, how does, not necessarily.
Although we're still learning. Cardiff and Shoreline is a good example locally from a similar type of system. Okay. So it depends. This is what I would say too on like what you see that year, what types of storms you see, particularly during winter, and kind of to like where the storms are coming from across the coast.
I can also chime in on that process. You can see it up in Carlsbad, actually. The process can also be really passive, so they put like they call the stakes in the ground that kind of capture the sand and like create sand buildup for the dunes.
Cool.
Yeah, so I think the ones that we visited in Carlsbad were maybe like a year or two in, and they're pretty small, but like the passive collection of that sand is like pretty good.
It's a good point too.
Yeah, integration, native plants too in those dunes are also gonna help solidify the dunes against, erosion and things like that. And those plants a lot of times help aggregate sand too, along with sand fencing, so you can see it actually in Dog Beach. So the plants get buried when we have windstorms and things like that.
Yeah.
The sand blows in from the beach, the plants catch the sand and they kind of grow on top of that sand they caught, so it kind of perpetuates the building of those dunes, so. Throughout the summertime, we have more and more, as we have winds kind of from the coast inland, it'll push some of that sand up into those dunes where the plants and some of the sand fencing can grade that sand and build up those dunes.
Also add that the dunes kind of stop the sand from blowing into the street too, and like the neighborhood, so it has multiple benefits to it in addition to the like sea level rise.
And if I may, just going back to Cardiff, Scripps is partnering with that project to do the monitoring, the long-term monitoring. To look at the success and viability of that. And after we had very significant wave activity this past winter, with an El Nino, January, February in particular, the Cardiff dunes are pretty much wiped out. Which some people are like, oh, it's big bummer, but it's like, no, actually, those dunes kept Highway 1 from flooding. Yeah, which it tends to do over closer to the river mouth, where that restaurant row is, that floods regularly, but where the dunes are, I mean, that's a different elevation, it's different topography even, and doesn't see flooding nearly as often, but it would have, absolutely. You could see the results of that by the impact of those dunes there. So they did their job, but it does kind of beg the question of regularity of upkeep, maintenance, having to replenish those dunes, replant natives. There were natives that were planted there. So it could definitely help, and it really does change based off of the kind of the cycle that we're in, the weather pattern, heading into a La Nina. Will that maybe tamper down a little bit of the wave impacts? Also with El Nino, you do see almost like this kind of like acceleration of sea level rise because of the warming effect. So it gives us a little bit of glimpse into the future even, and then that increases wave activity as well. So it will, no pun intended, it will ebb and flow.
Anne or Andrew, can you guys see the slides now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, you should have yelled at me earlier that you couldn't see the slides. I realized I wasn't screen sharing.
No problem.
Okay, so next Ocean Beach beachfront is essentially a continuation of the Ocean Beach Dog Beach dune system and multi-use path carrying it down to our pier. We are coordinating closely with the pier team, so the projects are kind of in sync and thinking about where these projects connect. And then finally, we have Sunset Cliffs. For this, we have kind of looked at Sunset Cliffs Boulevard and broken the run section into the northern section and the southern section. For actually, go to the next slide. So this is our northern section. What we are looking at here is realignment of the parking lots that are currently out on the cliff edge, away from the cliff edge. This is consistent with the Sunset Cliffs Natural Park Master Plan. So looking at pull-in parking or reverse pull-in parking, that allows us space both to do some revegetation of the cliffside, to think about the trail network on the cliffside and what that looks like, as well as to have a continuous separated pedestrian pathway and separated bike pathway throughout the stretch of the northern section of the road. We are maintaining parking along the far end here. And we anticipate that we will maintain the same number of parking spots that were in the parking lots and are now realigned. In the southern section, this is a much more space constrained section when we've seen some accelerated coastal erosion and impacts of that. So to address some of that space constraints, we are proposing that it moves from a two-way street and is realigned to a one-way. Along with that, the separated bike path will move back to being a share as it currently is in the roadway. That separated pedestrian path will be maintained. Again, we'll be looking to do some native plantings and revegetation along the coast and thinking about what that trail network looks like. Along the entire stretch of the road. Something else that's really important here is thinking about general safety and traffic calming. So something that we have heard from our residents is that cars drive way too fast. It's not safe for pedestrians and there aren't good spots. And so that is something that we're looking at as we think through the stretch of roadway, where can we make that road safer as well? So Andrew, to your earlier question comment, what I would say is, yes, we aren't really looking at the coast as much for this section. We're looking at the top of the cliff. However, we are looking to revegetate where possible and move away more human infrastructure from the cliffside and kind of have that be in the natural space now. There's a lot of work being done on the roadway, but a lot of that is so we can shift back from the cliff edge.
So with regard to the pinch point right there, you know, what was your sort of, how to put this, the cliff configuration? What year did you assume was the design condition? Now, or when the project is done, or 10 years out, or, because that cliff is moving, is it not?
It is moving. So I would say we know that these cliffs are really vulnerable. We do know that they're eroding. From previous coastal erosion assessments, we know that there are areas that are eroding faster where we are seeing some of those pinch points. We don't have a really detailed understanding of what those funds look like. We have applied for grant funding with Scripps and some of their researchers to do an updated coastal erosion assessment. Also to look at some sensors so that we have advanced warning there might be a cliff collapse, and so that we can better understand erosion trends. We have not heard back yet on that funding, so I don't know if we'll be able to move that work forward or not.
Okay, so this, again, we don't really have an idea of how robust this design would be under conditions at least of time, even though we don't have it modeled in the past. We don't.
Yeah, the idea is here is that we know that the cliffs are eroding, that we are moving back, we're creating space that humans aren't right on the cliff edge from a public safety concern. I'm also thinking about removing some of that weight of the cliffs by moving the cars off. Another thing that we need to explore further, we just don't have it in our current scope, is could there be potential storm improvements that would help with that storm loss?
Oh, yeah, also contributes to that.
Yeah.
Where does the opposing traffic go?
We routed through the community, specifics of that, what the traffic counts is like, all of that would be done in the traffic study in a future phase.
One of the things that we talked about at the public meeting on Tuesday was, I think you and Nick asked about long-term management components, and the locations, Mission Beach and Ocean Beach, where you talk about vegetated dunes, that we talked about native plants already, but in my opinion, native plants are good because they bring native birds, you know, the tack-on effects. Native plants have their own benefit, I guess. But just two things on that. In the OB one especially, if you plant native species on dunes and they survive there as a protection and resiliency structure, they might also attract birds if they are not run through by humans and dogs and that kind of stuff. So something like sand fencing, a lot of signs, a lot of on the ground management could be super helpful in actually improving, you know, a beach, 40 feet of beach, which is very human focused now, to improvement of native plants and the pollinators that they support, and also birds potentially nesting during certain times of the year. But it would take a whole lot of work in order to make, you know, not just be a sink of birds nesting and then being scared away and giving up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think signage and fencing are definitely something. I don't know that you can see it super well, but in theory, these are both fences where those pathways are. We're also thinking of some fencing on the back side here. But it is a kind of You want to have native plant there, you don't want to, you have to test it. But as we do that, one, we need to be monitoring to see like how effective the units function from a resilience standpoint, but also how are they functioning in terms of habitat, it's in wait list for species there. And then if we are, we have to be able to have the resources to adjust the management of those. Few more slides here. This is just an overview of the, apologies. There we go. So the community engagement that we've done to date, it's been an online survey that was launched in the spring. We did eight or 9 pop-up events at each of the beach locations, as well as some community-wide events in the spring. We had 2 in-person community workshops. We've been meeting our Single Advisory Committee and also outreaching to the tribes. Now in the fall, we've released our draft plan. Our PEIR should be out either tomorrow or very early next week, which is very exciting. We had a community webinar on Monday, as well as a stakeholder advisory committee meeting. We presented as an information item to CPC yesterday. Saturday, we will be at the Central Library for it's a family day DIY seed event. Tree SD is going to be there, they're giving away a tree, we'll be there. We're also looking for other community events that we can attend in December or January that would be good fits. So always taking recommendations there, as well as continuing that travel coordination.
Could you help me with CPC?
Community Planners Committee, so all of our community, we have different community planning areas. Within the city, each of them has a community planning group. The chairs of the community planning group get together at community planning committee.
Okay, I know what that is.
Yeah.
So, public comments would be due early January then?
The comments are going to be due in January, both the plan and the EIR will be out 4 to 5 days from the EIR release. We had the draft plan ready a little bit before the PEIR, so we wanted to give both extra time for people to review. It also allowed us to line up some of the outreach in advance of the holidays because we recognize next week since you have a little bit crazy for people with the holidays, and we wanted, you know, if we had things that were going to be in person or virtual, to make sure that people were ideally able to attend those.
Juliet, a question. Did you say you just met with the stakeholder advisory committee
We did on Monday.
on Monday?
We've met with them, I believe, 3 or 4 times throughout the development.
And then Monday night was public.
Monday was our community webinar. The slides from that are very similar to this, but they are posted on our website. We will have the recording posted to our website either end of this week or next week.
Very aesthetic question. Could you go back to the Sunset Cliffs one?
If you're gonna tell me the relief lines are off, I
Yeah, no, although it's good too. It's much crazier than that, but that's fine. But we've been talking about native plants a bunch,
yeah,
and the clip art for the open space here is not coastal sage scrub kind of
yeah,
looking, and just and with the knowledge that it takes, you know, a village to move all of us towards appreciating what habitat would be there, should be there.
yeah,
This looks like very beautiful green grass, very short, nicely mown, like you can run through and play kickball there, but that's not what it should or will look like.
Yeah.
Presumably, so lots of shrubs, you know, kind of brown, depending on the time of year.
yeah.
Or pick the green time of year and put green shrubs and lots of wildflowers in there. Would be much better and would help the community like actually see what kind of habitat you're talking about. Just tell Nick to do that, whoever made these. Use, you know, Southern California.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know
Well,
this was a
some of
lot of
these are
palm
like-
trees.
like
Yeah.
Our, there are some properties there that are part of property, so we're not touching those. Our multi-use path is also not going to be like red, our bike trails aren't going to be blue, like some of this was like to make things pop, so it's easier to see as you get further back here, because like a gray bike trail just doesn't show. And noted we can make it a little bit more true to native plant.
So the one-way street's gonna start at like that fork, like when it starts
Yeah.
going downhill, that's when the.
And, look at that, the intersection of Cordova, right here. And that's where we really start to see the space. control.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
But the elevations of the cliff faces that you've drawn in there are representative. of What they are expected to, like, sort of.
Yes and no, I would say this one's like fairly close to what it currently looks like. This one's a little bit hard because if you're familiar with Sunset Cliffs, some areas are quite steep, some areas even have potentially slipping areas. It's also a graphic, we're trying to be realistic, but we're also not spending tons of time and money on making it like super hyper realistic.
They're not doing 3D models yet.
No, no 3D models yet. So we wanted to get that extra example of, what does it look like? For this one, we had a little bit of additional bandwidth to move kind of beyond this level of graphic, and because Sunset Cliffs has a lot of components, we kind of tried to figure that out here, but I hear you. So these are some of the feedback themes that we've heard so far. The importance of safety, whether that is public safety actually at the beach, our safety officers who are, you know, patrolling the beaches, our lifeguards, but that's a really important thing to be thinking about. Everyone wants to make sure that they still have parking there. Most people still access the beach by their car. So maintaining parking, thinking about other ways that they can get to the coast, people who are excited by. People feel really strongly about the recreation at the beach, whether that's surfing or volleyball or going for a walk with their dog or their family. People want to be able to continue those activities. Like the ideas of inclusion, education and art, which I think is really cool and fun. So that's something for us to think about. How do we include that in our designs as they move forward? I think that's an interesting space. And how do we work with our communities to identify what that looks like? Strong support for native plantings, yay. The need for additional stormwater improvements at many of our sites. And then our community wants to continue to be engaged as these move forward.
Is there like a general feeling of like positive or negative, wary?
I think it's mixed. I think we've heard a lot of positive feedback. I think we've heard a lot of good issues raised and things that we need to think about as these projects move forward. I also think that something that is hard with sea level rise is you often, when we're planning for the future, there may be trade-offs. And we need to think through what are those trade-offs. How is space valued, how is space used, what is our priority as we think about the future of our coast. And I think that's where that continued engagement is really important. That working with the whole of our community through what is our future coastline.
So I assume the secret document will include the new project alternative, which should get, I don't know if you are projecting that into time. Is no project now or project?
It's if we wanted to do it with the site. Not getting into super details, but it's looking at what does that mean, both in terms of where there might not be disruption to the site because we don't do anything, but also where there are positive aspects of these designs that would then move forward.
The trade-off part that you brought up is, you know, almost unsolvable for sure, very, very hard. For the parking standpoint,
Yeah.
we have a certain amount of parking currently, and access to the coast is still super unjust, unfair. What is the city's thinking about including the cost of running a trolley or a bus or that kind of thing at the expense or and then being able to remove parking spaces? Or does the city feel like there's no way that we can decrease the number of parking spaces unless we're offering public transit that's more connected or better connected? Or even if we do that, we still have to maintain, like, what's the public pressure for parking?
Yeah, I think our community is strongly about it. I think it can be often quite tricky to move parking and get that removed. We did hear some interesting suggestions from our Sunset Cliffs workshop from the community on parking, even if it's still is free, but having it be timed, so there's a bit of turnover, and or paid parking. I think for us, when we're thinking, how does this fit into the city's overall kind of goals? We don't want people to necessarily only be able to reach their coast by car. We want to make sure that they're able to walk there, to bike there, to take public transit there. And that's why I think it's like a shuttle running from an existing transit line to the coast is something that we want to look to have been coordinating with our sustainability and building department on that. There have been some lessons learned from the shuttle program that I think could help inform what shuttle program and good like in these sites.
I think beach access is so hard for public transit because everybody walks with a giant wagon or two surfboards or a bicycle or whatever. Yeah, it's very hard to fit those on any, in any car or bus or whatever, but
Especially kids.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
With kids.
yes.
Yeah, you might as well be going away for a week.
I
But
have-
there's a lot of.
What it is, I mean, they're kind of in, like, there's a amount of parking on the way shores and on a busy summer's day, you're barely keeping one spot in the parking lot, so, yeah.
Does this, just
There's
to,
also 17.
Yeah. That's very much how I feel. I am privileged enough to live close to the beach though, for sure, but does the city have an understanding of who uses those parking spaces and whether the existing amount of parking, the configuration of parking is actually being used by what the community is who's using the parking spaces?
Non-locals.
Yes, basically, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay.
If we had done, research study, or survey.
Two last things for me. In the workshop in Sunset Cliffs, showing that scope of the project, was it possible to give them any sense of the duration of this work over what period of time it will be done?
No, we have Sunset Cliffs set up as kind of a menu of options, meaning that we could look at realigning the parking lots first and not necessarily moving the southern section down to one lane. They could go individually. There could be some individual components there. For Sunset Cliffs, there are additional steps that we would need to take before it's implemented, such as a traffic study. We have also proposed potentially doing a temporary one-way just to see what that looks like for the community. Because there are some community concerns about moving it from a two-way street down to a one-way. What does that look like both for that road, but also for other roads in the community that may be receiving a circulation of traffic. So I guess my overarching kind of takeaway with these is it's just the first step. We're really excited to be looking into what can we do here, but it's just the first step. There's a lot of additional practical analysis, technical studies, engineering that needs to be done to kind of get the projects fully vetted. And then even at that point, we still need to have funding to implement the projects. And we also need to think about, to Andrew's point earlier, what does it look like to maintain these ongoing monitoring that we need for some of these sites.
And then lastly, I just had a question about the tribal coordination. What form is that?
So we've been reaching out to, we have tribal lists and contacts. We've been reaching out to those tribes to see if they are interested in coordinating or partnering with us, or if they have any specific requests. So one of the requests that we have seen is, to have a tribal monitor the sites should that project move forward. We have also been reaching out to some organizations that work closely with tribes in this space. I will say this is something that we are still really looking to expand the work that we're doing, the coordination that we're doing. We are very lucky to have a good amount of funding under the State Coastal Conservancy grant to support this work, to support partnering with tribes, recognizing that we are asking for time and expertise. So it's something that I would say to the board, definitely welcome suggestions that you have in this space. Our coastline was their coastline first. to be able to how we can include both like their tribal knowledge, their perspectives, but also really honoring the history of the side. For that, as we're thinking about not just these projects, but also the city's coastal resilience living.
Has there been talk around? Well, I don't know. Would we go back to the main themes? Yeah, regarding our parking conversation, I feel like an easy fix for that would be just information to the public about where there are public beaches and maybe even like somehow like a real time like information on how busy it is at the beach. So like if I'm like, oh, I want to go to the beach. And then I know there's a lot of parking at Mission Bay, Ventura Cove or something, but I know there's not any in La Jolla. I might head there. And so there might be like an easier solution of parking that doesn't involve construction. That's just like information. So I don't know if that kind of stuff has been, yeah, I would like to see more of those things considered, which are easier.
So, and as part of the intent of this is to help set the stage for future funding allocations and projects and potentially grants to help implement these projects.
Julia, would it be possible for us to give a list of all the stakeholders who couldn't find them online?
Yeah, you should.
And each plan has its own stakeholder group.
This is one plan,
One plan.
multiple projects, one plan. So
Right.
go to that today. It's reviewing all projects.
Right, but for this, so this, I know we're looking at one thing, but there's other plans that we're gonna be looking at as a.
It depends on the plan for it, is what I would say. Yeah, so some plans that are going to be, like a community plan update, I'm gonna be working really closely with the community planning group or a community. Maybe within the community where they might not have stakeholder. We've had one for all of our mobility assessments. As well as climate resilience team, just to wait and that's not those kind of concepts.
And so just looking at our meeting schedule and in your public review, we're welcome to submit comments on our own. And then am I correct in recalling that during the public hearing process, this will come to us for recommendation?
Correct.
That recommendation would mean at that point. Maybe I misunderstood. When would it come to us for a formal discussion?
As we started, so we're in the public review period right now. Updates will be made after the public review period closes. It's still the draft plan. Move forward to public hearing process anticipated in spring 2025. So I would be coming back to you. My project manager role to bring this forward to you guys for consideration. Recommendations. And within the environment committee.
The spring 2025-ish.
So the close of the public review period, is there a deadline? No deadline.
It will be 45 days from when our PEIR is issued, so likely early mid-January.
Right, well, that'll be published at some point.
Yes, either Friday or early next week.
So any general comments I think from this discussion will be appropriate then.
Yes, so I would say, thinking about what you want to comment on it. If you have feedback on how to improve this access, I don't like this about this design, I would alter this about this design. If it's the project itself, comment that on the plan. If you have comments on the environmental analysis, so when we're doing our PEIR, we're looking at what is the impact of those projects on the environment. If you have comments on that, that goes within the PEIR. We're a close team, we're going to see comments from both. But it helps us kind of think about like where are we addressing what is the purpose of each document. On that note, you can either provide feedback through our online feedback form that's linked from the project webpage. It's a smart sheet if you want to fill out feedback for Mission Beach because that's the only site that you feel really passionate about. You don't need to fill out the feedback field for every single site. You're obviously more than welcome to. It's open-ended, so you should just be able to write whatever feedback you have. If you don't like feedback forms, you can send comments or questions to Resiliency. It's within Gov.
Just a clarification on the outreach you guys are doing. You wouldn't be making presentations to individual entities.
But we send it to CDC. There's within our coastal communities, but also we're thinking of the beaches as a citywide asset resource that people in other communities also visit and utilize as well. Yeah, go ahead.
I think my concern about this is that there's not, that they are nature, I would define these as nature-based solutions for sure, but that they're not focusing on some places that have even more environmental, non-human value. Not non-human, but environmental value to the city functioning well. Do you think of, or does the team think of this plan as looking at these 6 areas because they are solving problems or addressing problems that repeat themselves throughout the other miles of coastline? So, and that makes sense to me, but we'll have this kind of Mission Beach problem in these 3 other places, and if we figure out what to do at Sunset Cliffs, then we can use it here at Port Loma, that kind of thing. Is it a template kind of discussion?
I think it's a no. I think each state is unique for its own reasons. We'll be arguing in this pilot projects to see kind of one, like what is possible, what works, monitoring them once they're implemented to see how effective they are. And if it would be something that we would want to replicate in other areas of the coast, we then have that information of here's what it looks like to implement it, here's how they've been performing, here's what those costs are. Certainly, very open to just because the site isn't within this plan doesn't mean that we could look at a nature-based solution for it. It was really these were the sites that through our prioritization process floated to the top, but we're looking to other applications as well.
2 other quick things, for the getting tribal input, do you have any events where you will go outside the city to Sequan Cultural Days or those kinds of things?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We went to some recently where we trouble wasn't just really hear the conversation, but we're certainly open to traveling to them as well.
Okay, would it be helpful to send some of those? Yeah, I don't know them super well, but I can think of a few that.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Okay, cool. And then Lovely Wetlands Day would be a great opportunity to share. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Love your wedding. I don't know that.
Great. It's definitely good. I'll be there.
All right,
Julie will be there. Andrew will be there.
where is it going to be? So across Marsh, the northeast corner of Mission Bay. It's close to Valentine's Day, so you can.
Managed by UC San Diego.
All that, a little bit there.
Really, in the
Cool.
plan that will be released, will there be background on how we got the list of 6?
Yes.
Thinking of, the list of
Yeah.
all the sites that were considered at risk at some point in some way.
Let me see if I can.
And then the prioritization matrix that led us to this particular, I think it's easier for people to really accept the narrowing of conclusions when they understand how that narrowing was done.
I'm gonna share my screen again here.
There's a,
Oh, goodness. Can I move this? I can't move it. I thought I was being tech savvy there, but I wasn't. Where just can't.
So my kids do on the sand dunes.
There we go. Okay, this is our project webpage. On it. There's the draft plan.
Yes.
Here's the feedback form. So if you open up the feedback form, So it looks like it also takes you to the draft in itself or the project webpage, open fields for each of the sites. And then open comment too, if there's anything else you want to add. There's a community webinar presentation, information about the pop-up event on Saturday. Our public engagement plan, this is also linked in the plan itself, that overviews our approach to our planned engagement opportunities. Then if you go to the draft plan. So all the project concepts are here. Appendix A is more details about each of the site. It also walks through that prioritization process and how we got down to the 6 sites.
All right, well, thank you for the presentation. Certainly more to come on that. Any other final comments or questions? Seeing none, we will move forward to our last agenda item, proposed agenda items for future meetings. In our bylaws, there's 2 things related to that. One is anyone at any time is welcome to propose to the chair future agenda items, but this is an opportunity for board members to suggest items to be on agenda for future meetings.
So that the work plan. Our plan for the work plan is to have a draft come to this committee in January. We discuss it and then it would potentially be adopted in February.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think that seems like a reasonable approach. I don't think we'd adopt it in one meeting.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so if other ad hoc subcommittee members want input, they would get that in January.
Yes.
We should not or cannot share the draft of the plan amongst us before the January meeting.
We should not share it before the January meeting. If anybody has individual feedback, I'd recommend you share that directly with the chair so that we can disseminate it to the committee. Subcommittee. Thank you.
But if you don't have any pressing information or communications for January, I would like to hear more about the climate dashboard that got released.
Andrew, did you hear that request or potential request? Oh,
I'm not sure I heard it actually.
The climate.
The climate dashboard.
Yeah, oh, it's been very.
That's a good idea. I think that might be good overlap with our sibling committee.
It doesn't necessarily have to be, if the agenda's packed, that's fine, but for one upcoming meeting, I'd like to learn more something on like the energy resiliency focus and plans around microgrids and anything energy related. And I say, and the other thing I would say is like ag and food topics, and the reason I'm saying both of those now is just kind of as a that would be feedback if that was not included in the draft, the plan that you guys are gonna be bringing to the next meeting is like, just to make sure that we look at all of those things, like the coastal, the marine habitat, the energy, the food and ag, and together. So just within the next few months, I'd love to see a presentation like this, but on those 2 subjects as well.
But Julie, just to build on that, because I agree about the energy stuff particularly. In one of the plans that are in progress or under the scope of this, what do we expect to have? Is there a place where energy resilience is already under discussion?
within, from a resilience standpoint, that falls under climate resilient SD. However, the microgrid work is currently being led through our energy team and sustainability ability, that they can come and share.
I'd also flag droughts, flooding, extreme heat. presentations from, what that be, PUD, stormwater, yes, planning.
Been debating for some time how to bring this up, but I wonder if it isn't appropriate for this group have a conversation about what does resilience mean to us? How do we know what it is? Because I think there are some principles that I know underlie my thinking about that. And I'm just, I don't know whether that is more likely to come up with work thing. I suspect you might be kind of getting into it, but perhaps a discussion within this whole.
Yeah, I think would be a good idea just to have everyone kind of share that, have a dialogue, and maybe I would add, what's an example of something that you think is a good example of resiliency, either you've seen locally or even internationally, or what is resilient? What success kind of look like?
Does the city have a very definition of resilience?
definition within climate resiliency, what it also that goes. Resilience means a lot of things in a lot of different contexts, and it's really broad, right? So there's like resilience from the food system, there's resilience on habitats, there's resilience on water supply, there's resilience on energy grid, there's resilience on buildings. So it's really, really broad, and I think that's where what does the city have maybe coming forward and moving forward at this time? I think that's maybe like part one would be my suggestions for you guys to understand what is moving forward, what do we have happening in this space? And then also the board itself to think about what are those subject areas that you want to focus on? Because it can have so many different contexts. When you look at our plan itself, it's not it is managed by city planning, but it goes across all of our city departments, essentially all of our operations. And even with that, we're probably not touching all of the spheres of resilience. So I think thinking about where do you want to focus on, what are those either subject matter areas or specific projects would probably be helpful, just because it is quite broad.
Is there a city plan or initiative internally? I know there's like a lot of associations and nonprofit groups that are doing the food and ag as it relates to climate crisis. Does the city have anything like that?
We have some strategies built within our climate action plan, resiliency, that look at access to healthy food or localized food systems. However, I would say that is the area that we have the most robust programming. I think there's always area for expansion of that, particularly when we're thinking about some of our developed areas, what does a localized food system look like in a city context?
So, you don't know this, and I apologize for asking you so many questions. I want to thank you for your willingness to go through all of this in such detail. But for me, there's a big question about whether resilience is solely focused on human survival or I would propose habitat and other species survival. And then backing that back up a level, how does the city think about that? Because we only have what we can affect, the city infrastructure, but we can make decisions about those things with regard to either, our residents and voters or the wider population of non-human species on the planet. I would find it interesting to know whether there's already a perspective on that, and to what extent this board can be part of that discussion.
I would love to have climate resiliency and most of my actual version because I think that's really the job of what are those priorities. And some of it is community focused, it's the connected approach to communities. It's in an equitable city. Those goals are very focused on our community members, making sure they're safe, that they have the resources that they need. We're also focused on our city operations. That's that critical city goal, right? Of like, we need to be able to maintain our water and our wastewater services. Our trash collection services, those are essential services that we're providing. We need to be able to maintain those during some of these events. But we also have to find natural environments accessible, and within that, we're looking at and prioritizing, how are we restoring habitat on the coast, how are we thinking about urban systems, how are we thinking about our open space, how are we incorporating climate change projections into how we're managing and planning for our natural open space areas, so it's all of it.
Well, Jamie's taking notes. I think, I've also taken some notes. We can get these in the minutes. And I think a lot of these, obviously not, will be in January, but can get added to the work plan as kind of when they can be accomplished and talked about in more detail.
I mean, it's like a philosophical session.
What is resilience? How are we-
What is it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think
What
it's
matters?
important as a group that we level set and like be on the same page about.
Yeah,
things, like
for sure.
very foundational terms.
Okay. Any other comments or suggestions for the group? Okay, with that, we are adjourned. We do not need a motion to adjourn.
Thank you everyone for attending.